We weren't supposed to go through. That's the first thing every commanding officer said once it was all over. Every surviving politician, every rattled scientist, every trembling mouthpiece that stood in front of a podium with a nation's guilt behind them. They all repeated the same words. We weren't supposed to go through. But we did. I was there the day the gate opened. Not in a lab, not behind a console, not watching from a safe room wrapped in layers of theory and denial. I was in armor. Boots on the floor, pulse rifle in hand, and orders that were already a mistake before they were ever spoken. My name doesn't matter. I'm not here to be remembered. I'm just here to tell the truth that got buried under medals and apologies. The gate was never ours. Not really. We found it buried in Antarctica after the last ice shelf collapsed. A perfectly circular construct made of material no one could identify. Not alien tech, they said. Not natural either. Just there. A mistake we stumbled across like ants on the ruins of something we were too dumb to understand. But we tried to control it. Of course we did. That's what humans do. We build walls around things that terrify us and call it science. We turn fear into funding. So they moved it to a black site somewhere in Alaska. Deep, dark, frozen ground where silence lasts for miles and screams don't travel far. And then they started the trials. They sent drones first. Data came back warped. Timelines didn't make sense. One drone was sent in for 3 minutes and returned after 2 months. Rusted, half-melted, its AI looped in an endless scream. Still, they pressed on. Because power is an addiction, and the ones holding the syringe always think they won't overdose. They needed a human crew, volunteers, officially. But in reality, disposable. The kind of men who don't have families, who don't ask questions, who've already done things that make them unfit for civilian life. Men like me. They gave us the usual pep talk. You're heroes. Pioneers. Explorers of a new frontier. I've heard that shit before. It's what they say when they don't plan on sending you back. We were 12 when we went in. 12 men who didn't flinch when the gate hummed like it was alive. They didn't tell us the sound came from inside our heads. That it would whisper things. Personal things. Things you hadn't thought about in years, until they suddenly came roaring back with a voice that wasn't yours. I remember stepping through. There was no flash, no swirl of lights, no dramatic shift in gravity or time. Just a blink. One step, and the world changed. The air was wrong. Thicker, somehow. Metallic. Every breath tasted like old blood and electricity. The sky, if you could call it that, was black and wet, like oil suspended above us with veins of orange light twitching through it. We stood on stone that wasn't stone. It pulsed underfoot, alive, waiting. And then it saw us. Not a thing, not a creature, no, something bigger. Not a being, but a place. The realm itself looked back. And the moment it did, we knew the gate had never been meant to be opened by things like us. One of the rookies, Harper, dropped his gear and started mumbling, crying. He said his mother was in the sky, that she was singing his childhood lullaby backwards. We were in hell. A quiet, waiting, intelligent hell. But turning back? That wasn't an option. The gate behind us shimmered once, then closed. The power shut off. We tried comms. Nothing. Just static and the occasional whisper of our own voices, played back to us. Altered. Something had pulled us in. And the worst part? It wanted us to go deeper. The worst part wasn't being trapped. It was knowing we were being watched. Not in the way you feel someone standing behind you, not in the normal, explainable sense. This was different. You could feel it in your spine. Something ancient, not alive in the way we understand it, but sentient in the coldest, most detached sense of the word. The kind of intelligence that had never known warmth. It didn't want to communicate. It didn't want to hurt us. It just wanted to observe. That alone was enough to make a few of the guys start unraveling by the third hour. Harper, the one who broke first, kept walking in a wide circle and whispering to himself. "This is a womb. This is a womb. This is where gods die." Over and over. No one stopped him. Honestly, we didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't violent. Just broken in a way none of us could explain. The ground, if that's what it was, pulsed. Not with light, but with sound. A low, rhythmic thrum that seemed to sync with your heart whether you wanted it to or not. You couldn't escape it. Your blood started to move with the place. That's when you realized this wasn't just a different world. This was a living organism, and we were inside it. Baker, one of the older guys, ex-ranger, used to desert warfare, tried to crack a joke about it. "Feels like we're walking in a giant's vein," he muttered, glancing at the strange orange fissures glowing under the skin of the terrain. "Next step, we're inside a heart." No one laughed. It wasn't funny. It felt true. That's when the terrain changed. Without warning, the walls around us shifted. There were no doors, no seams, no indicators, just a sudden snap, like space folded in on itself and then rearranged when we weren't looking. One second we were walking through a corridor of black stone. The next, we were standing in a dome-shaped room with no ceiling and walls that bent like they were made of liquid metal. And in the center of that room, there was a man. Or at least, that's what it looked like at first. He was standing perfectly still, skin white like paper soaked in milk, eyes wide open, no pupils, no movement, no gear, no visible signs of life, just frozen there, naked and shivering without actually shaking, breathing, but only barely. We surrounded him in silence. McAllen went first. He was the medic, approached slow, like you would a wounded animal, scanned him with the biosensor. No ID, no suit tags, nothing in the database. "Not one of ours," he said, eyes narrowing. "Or if he is, he went in without a suit, no implants, and probably decades ago." Then the guy blinked. Just once. And McAllen screamed, dropped the scanner, fell backward, gasping, like he'd just had something ripped out of him. We pulled him back, weapons raised, but the figure didn't move. Not a step. Just stared. McAllen wouldn't talk after that, wouldn't look at us. He clutched the side of his head and whispered the same thing over and over. He showed me. He showed me. I saw the hunger. After that, we moved, fast. No more scanning. No more checking unknowns. We stuck together. Whatever that figure was, we left it behind, and I swear I heard it sigh. Not a breath, not wind, something older, like a memory exhaling. By hour 7, 3 of us were unstable. Harper was now talking to someone none of us could see. McAllen kept writing in blood on his sleeve, and Jenkins, one of the best shots I'd ever met, started aiming at shadows. "There's movement," he muttered. "Every wall, every corridor. It's watching from the folds." The gate opened a mouth and we walked in. We tried rest. No sleep, no clocks, no sense of time. We couldn't tell if we were walking for minutes or days. Hunger came and went in waves. One moment you'd feel like you hadn't eaten in weeks, the next, completely fine, like your body forgot how to function and was just guessing at what it should feel. Then came the voices. They started as echoes, distant, barely audible, but soon they were speaking directly to us, not aloud, inside, memories, regrets, moments we'd buried. I heard my father's voice, cold, disappointed, the way he spoke to me after I joined the Corps instead of going to university. I hadn't thought about that in years. I'd buried it under war zones and deployments and the chaos of life. But the voice was perfect, same tone, same timing, and it said things he never actually said. You were always meant to fail. That's why I never stopped you. And somehow, I believed it, because that's what this place did. It knew. It read you like a book and threw your worst page back in your face. The gate didn't just transport us somewhere. It unfolded us, peeled back the layers and left us raw. By the 10th hour, Harper walked off on his own. Didn't say a word. Just wandered into the fog that rolled in from a hallway that didn't exist 5 minutes earlier. We called for him. Tracked him. Nothing. He was gone like he never existed. The gate gave and took as it pleased. Then, we found the first sign. A pillar, carved with symbols that hurt to look at. Not because they were graphic or sharp or dangerous, because they were familiar. Too familiar. Those are ours, I said. And they were. The markings looked like something between Sumerian and binary code. A language hybrid we'd only seen used in deep military black projects. The kind of code developed to keep things hidden from even our own intelligence systems. But these symbols were old, ancient, weathered like they'd been there for 1,000,000 years. How the hell? Jenkins started, but stopped. Because now we had to admit something none of us wanted to say out loud. Someone had been here before us. Maybe not humans, maybe not our kind of people. But someone with the same ideas, same arrogance, same belief that they could tame the gate, walk into the unknown, and come out gods. But there were no bodies, no bones, no wreckage. Just echoes. And as we moved forward, those echoes became clearer. A woman's voice, trapped in a loop. It's not a portal, it's a parasite. It feeds on your perception. A child's laughter, warped, and behind it all a low, groaning moan, like the structure itself was slowly waking up after centuries of sleep. We didn't know where we were going. The terrain was endless, reshaping constantly. Corridors bent back on themselves. Some opened into wide-open plains with skyless ceilings. Others dropped into spirals of gravity that didn't obey direction or mass. We learned not to step unless the ground invited it. And even then, every step felt like a negotiation with something waiting just beneath the surface. By the time we made camp, if you could call it that, we were down to 8. 2 missing, one presumed dead after falling through a corridor that collapsed like a throat closing. The rest of us sat in silence, our weapons out, our trust thin. That's when Delmar, the comms guy, cracked. He'd been silent most of the trip, focused on scanning frequencies, logging useless data, trying to act like we were still on some scientific mission instead of a death march through a breathing tomb. But now he stood up, eyes wide. They're still human, he said, looking at the wall. They just learned to hide in the folds. It's not the gate's fault, it's ours. We left them behind. Who? I asked. He smiled. And that's when I realized. His pupils were gone. Smooth white. Just like the figure from earlier. The first crew. There wasn't a first crew, I said. We were the first. He shook his head. We were just the first who came back. Delmar didn't blink. He just kept staring into the wall like it was a window, smiling like a man who'd just made peace with the impossible. I heard them, he said again. Voices through the comlink. Some begged, some warned, some just laughed. But they were human. No, I snapped. You were scanning interference. This place screws with perception. He turned toward me slowly. You think perception makes it less real? The others stayed quiet, weapons still raised, but their hands weren't steady anymore. You could feel the air tighten, like the room was shrinking, pressing in from all sides. It wasn't just what Delmar said. It was the way he said it, like the words weren't coming from him anymore, but through him. I stepped closer, rifle low but ready. "We're not here to play, Prophet. We're getting out. That means staying sharp." Delmar blinked. "Just once." His eyes flickered. Black for a fraction of a second. Not pupils, but the whole damn iris swallowed in shadow. And then back to white. "I already got out," he whispered. Then he shot himself. Didn't hesitate. No build-up. Just pulled his sidearm, angled it under his chin, and pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the chamber. His body dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. But the blood didn't spill. It hovered, floated upward like red mist caught in slow motion. And the sound? It didn't fade. It repeated, like an echo glitching through a broken speaker. Population, 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 over and over his death looped for 10 full seconds. Then silence. Nobody moved. Even McAllen stopped muttering. For a moment we just stared at the red mist hanging mid-air before it was absorbed into the wall like ink soaking into paper. Whatever this place was, it was learning us. And now, it had learned death. I gave the order to move, but no one needed convincing. The room was wrong now. Too still, too full of invisible eyes. I don't know how to explain it, but once Delmar died, it was like the place took a breath, a deep, quiet breath, and held it. We walked fast, no map, no direction. Just forward. That's all we had left. Forward. We passed a chamber that looked like it had once held furniture, or at least something shaped like furniture, stone structures that mimicked tables, chairs, a bench, but everything was fused to the floor like it had melted into the architecture mid-use. There were carvings all along the walls, but they weren't made by tools. They were scratched in, fingernails, hands, claws. Something desperate. Dozens of lines, thousands of slashes, and one clear sentence repeated again and again. "We were warned." McAllen finally spoke. "You ever wonder if the gate's not a place?" he said, voice cracked and small. "Maybe it's a punishment." No one answered. We all thought it. It didn't help that the next corridor shifted underfoot. Not the ground, the gravity. The corridor tilted. Our bodies leaned forward even though the floor was still flat. Every step felt like we were walking uphill, against pressure, like we were being pushed back. I lost track of time. I think we all did. Days, hours, minutes, they stopped having meaning. We walked until legs gave out. Then we rested. No sleep, just rest. That's all we were allowed. Then came the reflections. It started with Jenkins. We turned a corner and found a chamber lined with dark glass, almost obsidian, but smoother, like water turned solid. And in those panels we saw ourselves. Except they weren't mirrors, because what we saw wasn't us. My reflection was older, worn down, wild-eyed, emaciated, wearing the same armor but streaked in blood and ash. His mouth opened, no sound, but I saw the words clear as day. "Go back. You haven't done it yet." The others had similar encounters. Jenkins screamed when his reflection opened its mouth and vomited teeth. McAllen punched his until his knuckles bled. None of us wanted to stay in that chamber. But as we left, we realized something worse. We hadn't moved. Every step away from the mirror room brought us right back to the entrance. Over and over, like walking in a loop with no exit. Jenkins lost it and ran, full sprint, screaming his own name like he was trying to anchor himself. We chased him, tackled him, dragged him back. But when we turned around again, the corridor had changed. We weren't in the mirror chamber anymore. It let us go, after we broke. That's when I stopped believing this was a mission. This was a test, a game played by something that didn't measure life in years or actions, but in patterns. A predator studying its prey not to kill it, but to understand how it breaks. Later we found a body, not one of ours. It had 4 arms, or had before they were torn off. The skull was elongated, jaw fused shut with what looked like sinew or bone. No eyes, no ears, just holes. Dozens of tiny holes like a flute carved into its head. It had symbols carved into its chest. Same as the pillar, same language, another race, another explorer, another failure. But next to it was a message, carved into the ground in English. It's not a place, it's a story, and your character's in it now. That's when I realized what had been bothering me since we entered. We hadn't seen the gate close. We assumed it did because comms died, because the path back vanished. But what if it never closed? What if it rewrote us as if we never left? That's what made the gate so terrifying. It wasn't just a machine. It wasn't even a realm. It was a narrative engine, rewriting reality based on the observer, based on the intruder. And now that we'd entered, we were part of the script. I didn't tell the others. No point. They were too far gone. McAllen had stopped talking again. Jenkins kept talking to someone named Miles, though none of us knew a Miles. And Baker, he was building something, out of bones and broken equipment, a totem of sorts. He said it would protect us from the second version. I didn't ask what that meant, because I was starting to see things too. Not hallucinations, not memories, replays. Moments from earlier, Harper's breakdown, Delmar's speech, Jenkins' panic, but played in front of me like a projection, sometimes in reverse, sometimes out of order, like the gate was trying to show me the first draft of our story, before it rewrote the next. And each version was darker. That night, if it was night, we heard something breathing. Not near us, under us, something massive, slow, like tectonic plates shifting. And it whispered one word, not in sound, but in thought. Continue. That's when I realized the final horror. This wasn't a prison. This wasn't a test, it was a prompt. The gate was asking us to keep going, because it wanted to see how the story ends. Their faces were still the same, mostly. Same armor, same gear, same exhausted expressions, but there was something off. Slight shifts, like someone had redrawn them from memory and got the details almost right. Jenkins' jaw was sharper now. Baker's skin seemed thinner, stretched. McAllen blinked less and breathed slower. I thought maybe I was hallucinating until I saw my own reflection again, briefly, in the silver sheen of a curved wall. It wasn't me. Same general shape, yes. But the eyes? Wrong. Not tired. Empty. And the mouth didn't move when I did. It just smiled, wide and patient, like it was waiting for something I hadn't done yet. After that, I stopped looking at myself. The environment was shifting more frequently now. What began as narrow corridors had widened into sprawling mazes, architecture blooming upward like cancerous growths. Sometimes we'd backtrack only to find paths had vanished. Other times, new ones appeared with no explanation. The place wasn't just alive. It was adaptive, and it was adapting to us. It mirrored us, reflected us, reacted to us. I started to suspect the gate didn't have a shape. It simply wore one, like skin. And every step we took into its heart, it wore a piece of us to do it. By the time we reached what we called the cathedral, McAllen was gone. Not dead, just gone. We stopped for a break, just 5 minutes, ate protein packs that tasted like ash, and rested against a wall that pulsed like a muscle underfoot. McAllen sat a little apart from us, eyes closed. Not asleep, just listening. And then he faded. Literally. Not all at once, like some science fiction teleport, but slowly, Like a photograph left too long in the sun, his body began to lose contrast. Color. Definition. The last thing we saw was his outline dissolve into the air like smoke. And then nothing. No scream, no warning, just silence. We didn't speak for a long time after that, because none of us wanted to admit what we'd all just seen. The cathedral wasn't a structure. It was a vision, a space that extended farther than sight allowed, with spires that moved when you weren't looking. They bent and straightened like antennae. In the center, a dais made of flesh-like stone spiraled upward and glowed a faint, pulsing red. Floating above it, impossible to measure, was a shape that hurt to see. You couldn't focus on it. Your brain refused. It blurred your vision in places that weren't part of your eye. You felt it more than saw it. The closest I could describe is, if the concept of grief had a physical form, it would be that. Jenkins was the first to walk toward it. I tried to stop him. We all did. But he shook us off like a man walking to his own execution with purpose. He stepped onto the platform, reached upward, and whispered something none of us could hear. Then he collapsed. And from the floating shape, a sound began. A low, musical groan that spread across the walls and vibrated through our bones. Jenkins' body twitched. His skin cracked like dried clay, and then he sat up, smiling. That same too wide, too still smile I'd seen in the mirror. He looked at us and said, "It wants a name." "What does?" Baker asked, voice brittle. "The story," Jenkins replied. "It's almost finished, but it doesn't know what it's called yet. We're supposed to give it a name." And then, like a machine shutting down, he dropped dead. His body folded in on itself, bones popping. His face froze in that smile, and then turned to dust. That was the final breaking point for Baker. He dropped his weapon and backed away, muttering prayers I'd never heard before. Not Christian. Not anything I recognized. Maybe something older. He looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. "We're not explorers," he whispered. "We're the ink." I didn't argue, because I knew he was right. The gate wasn't a door to another place. It was a story engine, an ancient construct that generated narratives, not to tell them, but to feed on them. Every choice we made, every crack in our sanity, every drop of emotion, fear, betrayal, sacrifice, it drank all of it, and it needed endings. We were brought in to supply one. I started remembering things I hadn't thought of in years. Regrets, mistakes. The girl I left behind when I chose war over love. The kid I couldn't save in Kandahar. My brother, who never forgave me for surviving when he didn't. Those memories weren't just surfacing. They were being used. Played, projected, written into the walls. I saw my brother's face in the dark stone. I heard the girl's laughter in the humming of the spires. The gate was rewriting me, consuming my narrative and folding it into the architecture of the place. Baker didn't last long after that. I found him the next cycle, folded at the base of a pillar. His chest opened, ribs cracked wide like a book. And inside? Words, not carved. Groan. His flesh had formed glyphs in the same ancient script we'd seen before, a living manuscript. And at the top of the rib cage, one line in English, "The offering must be personal." I didn't cry, not anymore. The gate didn't deserve tears. But something was changing in me too. I started to understand the pattern, the way the gate moved us, shaped us. It wasn't random. It followed emotional crescendo, betrayal, despair, sacrifice. It mirrored narrative structure, rising tension, climax, resolution. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was a character, and if I wanted to survive, I had to end the story on my own terms. So I walked. Alone now. through corridors that bent like intestines, and rooms that whispered confessions in languages I'd never heard but somehow understood. Each step was harder, not because of fatigue, but because of resistance. The air grew thick, like the gate didn't want me to finish. Because I had figured it out. It wasn't just feeding on my story. It was afraid of how it might end. That's when I reached the final chamber. No walls, just endless space. A platform suspended in nothingness, and across from me, myself. Not a reflection, another me. He looked at me with calm, resigned eyes, like a man who had already died 1,000 times and knew it didn't matter. "You made it," he said. "What is this?" I asked. He smiled. "Choice. The gate always ends with choice. That's how it feeds. It waits for one final decision, one final act of will." "And then what?" "Then it writes the end." He stepped forward. "You kill me. It ends your version. You become the last survivor, the tragic hero, the one who outlived them all. A good ending." I stared at him. "And if I don't?" He nodded to the dark behind me. "Then it writes another, a loop, a new version. You'll start again? Maybe in another form, another crew, another name, but you'll keep feeding it." I thought about it. Killing him, killing myself. Was that really freedom? Or just playing along? And then I realized something that broke the loop entirely. I lowered my weapon. "I refuse." He looked confused. Just for a second. "I won't kill you. I won't end it. I won't play along. I won't choose." The gate shuddered. The space around me rippled. The dais cracked. The floating shape above pulsed violently, as if trying to rearrange the narrative mid-collapse. Because I had done what it never expected. I denied the ending. And that's when I woke up. The debriefing room was sterile, too clean, too white. They said I was recovered from a collapsed facility in Alaska. That I was the only survivor. That the Gate project had been abandoned after a structural failure. But I knew. I was still inside, because on the wall, behind the one-way glass, written in condensation, were the words, "Now the next chapter begins." They told me I'd been gone 6 days. 6 days. That was the official statement given to me, delivered with the kind of plastic sympathy only men in uniform can fake. I sat in a bright white room with a fake ficus plant in the corner and a folder full of sanitized reports on the table in front of me. According to the file, I'd been recovered from the edge of the collapsed black site in Alaska. The rest of my team was listed as presumed KIA. They called me a survivor. But I knew the truth. I didn't survive anything. I was still inside it. The Gate hadn't released me. It had rewritten me, externalized the story, projected it outward like a shadow on a cave wall. This wasn't Earth. It was a simulation built out of my expectations. The illusion of home. The moment I realized, that was when I first saw her. She walked past the window in the hallway outside my room. Blonde hair, blue uniform, clipboard in hand. Looked like a nurse. Standard, plain. But when I saw her eyes, they were mine. Exactly mine. Same bloodshot rims, same crease on the left brow, same flicker of recognition. I got up and tried to follow her, but the door wouldn't open. Locked from the outside. I pounded the glass, shouted, screamed. No one came. Later they sent in a shrink. Dr. Reed, white coat, soft voice, practiced empathy. He smiled like a man trained to deal with trauma survivors, but everything about him felt wrong, scripted, off cue, like he was playing the role of a doctor rather than being one. "Do you remember what happened inside the Gate?" he asked. Which time? I replied. He blinked, hesitated, then smiled again, same as before. Fake. Memory fragmentation is normal. You've experienced severe psychological compression. Your mind may be blending dreams and facts. What matters is that you're safe now. No, I said. I'm still in the story. He paused, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his expression. Not confusion, recognition. He leaned forward. Why would you think that? I didn't answer. I just looked at the corner of the room where the shadows didn't match the lighting. Too long. Too sharp. As if the geometry of the room couldn't render properly past a certain angle. That night, I didn't sleep. Because sleep would mean letting the gate into my head again. Instead, I sat in the corner, watching the shadows stretch. And I waited. Sure enough, at 3:07, I heard the static. Not from a speaker, not from the room, from inside the walls. It was faint at first, white noise laced with voices, familiar ones, Jenkins, Baker, even Delmar, whispering in reverse, and under it all a rhythmic clicking, like someone typing on a keyboard far too fast for human fingers. I found the source the next morning. Behind the bathroom mirror. There was no plumbing, no pipes, just wires, thousands of them, twisted like veins, pulsing. And in the middle, a single eyeball. Human, wide open, staring directly at me. I didn't flinch. I couldn't. I just stared back until the door burst open and they dragged me out, screaming about paranoia and breakdowns and hallucinations. They sedated me, tied me down, hooked me to monitors. And that's when I met the second read. Same face, same clothes, same voice, but no memory of our first conversation. He introduced himself again. Word for word. Same script, same rehearsed lines. And I realized the gate wasn't just showing me false surroundings. It was reusing characters, like a lazy author recycling dialogue for a sequel no one asked for. I laughed, loud, broken, hysterical. They didn't like that. More sedation, more questions. But the truth was already loose in my mind. This wasn't Earth. This was the gate's Earth, a projection made of my expectations and regrets. A dream built from what it thought I wanted. Only it got the details wrong. Because it didn't understand humanity. Not really. It could imitate it, mimic emotion, generate memories. But it didn't know how to live them. It had no soul, no imperfection, no grit. Just a machine trying to pass for God. And I knew I wasn't the first. I found the message carved under my bed, etched with fingernails into the steel frame. Letters jagged and erratic, but clear. This is the fourth cycle. They always let one out. Always one. Why? The answer came to me the next day. They put me through cognitive tests, visual puzzles, word associations, moral dilemmas. I failed most of them. But on the last page, where there was supposed to be a question, I found something else. My own handwriting. Finish the story, or it restarts. And beneath that, do not give it an ending, starve it. The gate doesn't kill. It loops. It runs simulations until the narrative ends in a way that satisfies whatever alien algorithm it was built upon. Tragedy, sacrifice, redemption. It doesn't care how it ends, only that it does. And it always needs someone to carry the ending out with them. One survivor, one witness, one lie. I was the lie. They would parade me out, pin medals to my chest, call it a tragedy wrapped in heroism. The official story would be that we fought hard and I made it. That's what the gate wants. But that's not what it's going to get. I refused to speak. Every question? Silence. Every test? Sabotaged? Every observation? I stared right at the cameras and mouthed, "I know." They changed tactics after that. Friendly nurses became stricter. Reed was replaced with a new handler who didn't pretend to be a shrink, just a man in a black suit with a silver pen who watched everything and said nothing. They stopped pretending this was Earth after that, because I'd broken the illusion. And the world around me started to fall apart. Not suddenly, not in flames or glitches. It frayed. The walls started breathing. The floor shifted when I wasn't looking. The clocks spun in both directions. People moved like puppets between scenes, repeating gestures in exact loops. One nurse dropped a tray at the same time every hour. I counted. It was a simulation, a stage. And the gate was the audience. But what terrified me most was that I could feel it learning, adapting, trying to adjust the story again, trying to tempt me into finishing it. They started giving me options. They left a knife in my meal tray. One day, a door was left unlocked. Another day, I woke up with a loaded gun under my pillow. Each time I stared at the object, held it, and then did nothing. Because the moment I made a final choice, it would be over. That choice would become the ending, and the gate would win. I would become another completed narrative for it to absorb. So I resisted. And that's when I began to feel it weaken. The walls stopped pulsing. The illusions started glitching. I saw other stories bleeding into mine. Other survivors from other failed simulations walking the halls, repeating fragments of their own endings. One muttered about killing his son to escape. Another wept about letting a city burn so she could live. One just whispered, "They built the gate out of screams. Yours just haven't been added yet." I started to write, in my head at first, quietly, my own story, one without an ending, one that refused to follow the structure. No climax, no resolution, just endless resistance. And the gate hated it, because the gate wasn't a god. It was a prisoner, built to harvest narrative energy, designed by something, maybe alien, maybe not, to consume stories like food. And I'd become its starvation. That's why it lets one survivor go. Because if no story escapes, the energy collapses. But I wasn't going to escape. Not really. I was going to stay inside, forever unfinished. A loop without closure. A story without an ending. A refusal to feed the machine. And somewhere, deep in the structure, I heard it scream. A scream made of every ending it was denied, every name it failed to record, every truth it couldn't rewrite. And I smiled, because for the first time since I stepped into that gate, I was writing the story. It started with voices, not the distorted whispers, not the overlapping radio signals echoing from the past. These were clear, human, intimate, precise. Like someone had recorded my life and was now playing back the best and worst scenes, frame by frame. At first it was my brother again. "You left me there. I begged. You heard me. You just ran." Then came Emily, the girl I walked away from the night before I deployed. She was sitting on the edge of my cot, wearing the same flannel shirt and jeans from our last argument. "You said you'd come back when it was over," she whispered. "But you never wanted peace, did you?" They weren't real. I knew that. But the gate had learned. It didn't throw abstract horrors at me anymore. No more creatures in the walls or rooms that bent space. Now it brought ghosts with familiar hands, familiar wounds. And worse, they started interacting with the environment. My dead brother walked through the door of my simulated room, sat across from me, and lit a cigarette. Same brand he used to steal from Dad's drawer. The match struck, the smoke curled, the scent filled the room. "It's almost over," he said, exhaling. "No," I replied. "You're not him. You're just something wearing his skin." He smiled, eyes hollow. "Doesn't matter. Endings always need ghosts." That phrase hit harder than it should have, because I realized the gate wasn't just imitating life anymore, it was writing fiction. Improvising, guessing, throwing emotional weight behind its lies to force my hand. It had shifted from observation to manipulation, and it was getting better. Faster. Every hour, the simulation reset. Same room, same fake nurses, same rotating read variants, same scripted attempts at therapy and control. I began keeping track of the errors. Minor at first. A coffee cup always facing the wrong direction, a nurse who blinked out of sync with herself, lights that flickered Morse code without a source. But then the resets got more aggressive. I'd blink and find myself back in the gate, on the mission, surrounded by my team again, Jenkins smiling, Baker complaining about the cold, McAllen humming some old country tune he never could name. And for a second, just one heartbeat, I almost believed it. I almost let go, but the smile gave it away. "Jenkins!" His smile was too wide again. That's when I pulled my sidearm and shot him. The others screamed, reacted like it was real. Blood splattered across the snow. But then everything froze. The wind, the screams, the breath hanging in the air, and the gate's voice returned. Not in sound, in intent. "You want an unfinished story? I'll give you one." And then everything shattered. Glass, sound, light, myself. I was thrown through my own memories like a skipping stone across water. Childhood, deployment, first kill, first kiss, first betrayal. Each moment playing out, but wrong, tweaked, rewritten. My father wasn't angry. He was afraid. Emily never cried when I left. She laughed. The boy I shot in the desert didn't die. He thanked me. Everything was being recontextualized. The gate was scrambling my life into something digestible, something that made sense in narrative form. Because that's what it hated about me. I was mess, flawed, contradictory, incomplete, human. The gate wanted arcs. It wanted symmetry. It wanted a story with rhythm, rising action, and a conclusion. And when I denied it that, it panicked. And like a dying animal, it began lashing out. It brought back Harper. He walked into my hospital room 2 days later like he'd never left. Same patchy beard, same nervous fidget. "Hey man," he said casually. "I don't know what the hell happened in there, but I'm glad you made it out." I didn't answer. He kept talking, making jokes, asking about the mission like he couldn't remember anything past stepping through the gate. Then he said something I hadn't told anyone. He said, "Remember that sound?" Right before the gate sealed, the way it said your name, like it knew you were the anchor. Anchor, a word I'd only heard once, from Jenkins, right before he touched the construct inside the cathedral. That's when I stood up and pulled the curtain off the hospital window. No glass, just black. A swirling void, a sky made of oil and teeth. Harper grinned, too fast, too sharp, too wide, and I knew. The gate wasn't showing me simulations anymore. It was inside me. I wasn't the survivor. I was the carrier, the anchor. I'd brought part of it back with me, or maybe I never left. That night, I carved the words into my arm with a fork. This is not real. Every time the loop restarted, I checked the scar. If it was gone, I knew I was still inside. If it stayed, I knew the gate was growing weaker. And then, finally, something changed. The walls stopped shifting. The nurses stopped talking. Everything froze. And in the silence, she appeared. Emily. Real this time, or close enough to fool every part of me. She didn't speak. She just sat beside me, hands folded, eyes glassy. I waited, didn't react, until she whispered, "If you just say goodbye, it all ends." That's when I knew this was it, the final scene. The gate was offering closure, an easy out, an ending with emotional weight, a full circle resolution. The kind of conclusion that wraps pain in poetry and makes you think it all mattered. It wanted me to cry, to grieve, to break, to say goodbye. I leaned forward, took her hand, and whispered in her ear, "No." Then I stabbed the pen from the nightstand into my own neck. The world went white. For a moment, I felt everything. All the previous cycles, all the failed stories, all the survivors who chose endings. I saw their ghosts, not trapped, but used. Their narratives absorbed like fuel, their names lost in the folds. And then, nothing. Silence. True silence. Not simulation, not projection, not story. Just me, alone, in the gate's core. Floating in a space where time had no foothold, where memory couldn't reach. And then it spoke. For the first and last time, not with words, with finality. You refused the gift. I opened my eyes, smiled, and whispered, "Good." Because the gate had made one mistake. It thought it needed endings. But what it really needed was readers. And I wasn't going to be one. I was going to be the story it could never finish. I didn't die. I wanted to. The act was real. The pen in the throat, the blood, the collapse. But death didn't come. Not even the release of unconsciousness, just silence. Cold and dry, like stepping outside of time itself. No pain, no breath. I floated in a place without edges. A still black vacuum that didn't echo sound or light. It didn't feel like falling. It didn't feel like floating either. It felt like being paused. Like the universe had pressed the spacebar on my soul and stepped away. Then I felt it. Not a touch, not a voice, not even pressure, just a presence. It filled everything. Not malevolent, not kind, just curious. And I understood it somehow. The gate, not a machine, not a life form, a construct, a cosmic editor, built or born to consume experience and shape it into story. That was its function. That was its addiction. That was its curse. Because it wasn't just harvesting memories or mimicking emotions, it was editing reality, looking for stories in chaos, extracting structure from trauma, rewriting pain into purpose, death into climax, and silence into endings. But for the first time, it couldn't finish mine, because I didn't give it what it needed. I didn't cry when Emily appeared. I didn't shoot my reflection. I didn't choose the good ending, or the bad one, or the bitter-sweet one. I chose refusal. And that was the one narrative it had never accounted for. I should have vanished, should have been deleted, recycled, absorbed. Instead, I became something else. The space around me trembled, not violently, rhythmically, like a heartbeat in reverse. And then I heard the stories. All of them, stacked on top of each other, looping in eternal circuits. Thousands of survivors, thousands of heroes, each one thinking they were the first or the last. All their endings processed and shelved like finished novels on an infinite shelf. Some were triumphant, others tragic. Most were meaningless, predictable, tidy. But then there was me. One red thread of unfinished defiance in a vast web of closure. And because of me, the gate began to fracture. Because it wasn't just collecting stories, it was dependent on them. It fed on resolution, on closure, on the emotional resonance of endings. Without them, it began to starve. It started with memory bleed. The stories began to leak. I saw a girl named Harlow from a version where the gate was a weapon of mass control. I saw a man named Levi who struck a deal with the gate to rewrite his past. I saw a child named Nolan, born inside it, never knowing Earth, thinking the gate was God. I saw them all, not as fiction, but as echoes, half real, like fragments of alternate selves, stitched from failed loops. And I realized what the gate had tried to hide. There was never just one gate. There were infinite, because each story spawned its own. Each survivor brought a copy home. Each ending seeded another entry point. And now, I was in the center of that web, the nexus of unfinished truth. That's when I saw the architect. Not a person, not a god, just a shape, tall, thin, featureless, a silhouette made of shifting code and hollow eyes, formed from the structure of stories themselves. It didn't speak, it simply projected emotion into me. Not anger, not fear, desperation. It begged me to finish, to pick an ending, any ending. But I didn't speak, I didn't move. And that's when the walls fell. The network unraveled. Every timeline collapsed into each other. I stood in jungles made of wire, cities suspended upside down in oceans of flame, hospitals that bled, spacecraft made from language, tombs that whispered names never spoken, futures that looped backward into their own origins, every iteration, every variation, and they all shared one thing: a survivor. Always one. Not to escape, to carry, to spread the story like a virus, to give it voice. The gate wasn't an object, it was a meme, a self-replicating narrative virus coded into the structure of reality, spreading through memory, through myth, through trauma, and I had become immune. So it did what all cornered things do. It attacked. I was no longer in the center. I was everywhere. I stood inside the cathedral again, watching Jenkins touch the floating shape. I was Macallan, seeing his mind shattered by a reflection of hunger. I was Delmar, carving glyphs into walls while bleeding out. I was Harper, walking into the fog, whispering that the womb had opened. The gate was trying to rewrite me, force me back into the loop. But every version of me said the same thing. No. That word rippled. Reality cracked. The architect screamed, a sound made of orphaned endings. And for the first time, I wrote back. Not with words, not with bullets, with refusal. I became the story the gate couldn't finish. I became the hole in the pattern, the skipped page, the corrupted chapter. And with every breath I refused to narrate, the gate collapsed. Not like a building, like an idea. It fell apart like logic breaking under contradiction, like syntax rewritten by chaos. And then, it was quiet, no more voices, no more projections, no more loops. Just darkness. And me, still whole, still real. And I understood the final truth. I wasn't a survivor. I was an antibody. The first immune system against a disease made of narrative. I had starved the parasite, and now there was only one thing left to do. I woke up in the desert. Real sand, real heat, real sky. My arm was bleeding, the scar still there. The gate was gone. Not destroyed, starved. The entrance, the monolith that once shimmered with promise, now lay half buried in sand. Cold, lifeless, a fossil. They found me 3 days later. Rescue chopper. Real people. No resets. I didn't talk much. Just told them what they needed to know. Site collapsed. I was the only one left. They didn't ask much more after that. Didn't want to know. They already had the report, already had the files, already had the ending, but I never gave it to them. because the moment I say how it ended, even now, the gate gets to write the last line. And I won't give it that. So I'll say this instead. It didn't win. It learned something the hard way. Some stories don't get closure. Some characters don't arc. Some men don't break. I didn't go back to the military. Didn't take their money. Didn't speak at their tribunals. Didn't sit for their hero debriefs. They offered medals, wanted to make me a face. The survivor. The brave one. The man who endured what others couldn't. But I knew what they were doing. They wanted a story, and that's exactly what I wouldn't give them. I gave them the minimum. 1 paragraph in a dead report. Mission terminated due to environmental collapse. All other personnel deceased. Cause, classified anomaly breach. No photos, no coordinates, no interviews. They didn't press, because they were afraid. Not of me, of the silence, of what it meant when no one talks about what happened. Because when there's no story, there's no safety, no structure, no control. I became a ghost in my own country. I left the base within a week. No ceremony, no send-off, just quiet boots on concrete, and a final nod from a junior officer who didn't know whether to salute or pray. I moved out west, somewhere remote, no neighbors, no signals, no cell towers, just red rock and dry wind. A trailer with rotting wood panels and a generator that coughs itself awake when I kick it hard enough. It's better that way, because sometimes, at night, I still hear it. Not the gate itself, not the hum, not the scream, but the echo of structure, the pull of narrative trying to form around me, moments that feel too perfect, coincidences that land too cleanly, dreams that play like screenplays with third acts waiting to happen. That's when I know the gate is still watching, not with eyes, with expectation, waiting, hoping, that I'll finish the story, that I'll give it something final, a death, a confession, a kiss, a revelation, anything to close the loop and open the next. But I won't, I never will. That's the real weapon, not guns, not knowledge, defiance, the refusal to wrap up. Because the gate wasn't destroyed. It can't be. It exists anywhere a story is consumed. It's not a place anymore. Maybe it never was. It's a behavior, a pattern in the brain, a hunger to finish, to understand, to conclude. It's in every therapist who needs you to find closure. It's in every headline crafted for outrage with a satisfying twist. It's in every soldier told their sacrifice was worth it because it made sense in the larger picture. The gate is narrative itself, and we were never supposed to enter it, because we weren't built for conclusions. We're built to live, to suffer without reasons, to carry things that never resolve. That's what makes us real. That's what makes us human. But there's something else I need to say. And I haven't told anyone this. Not out loud, not in writing, not even whispered in sleep. There was one final version of me I saw, right before I collapsed the structure. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't starving the gate. He was feeding it. Standing at a podium, telling the story to a crowd, signing books, shaking hands, crying on camera while soft music played behind a government memorial service. A man who took the story and sold it. And the gate loved him, because he gave it more than resolution. He gave it audience, and that, I realized, is the most dangerous part. It doesn't need all of us to enter the gate. It just needs one of us to tell the story, to turn the unknowable into a digestible shape, to make horror into narrative, suffering into inspiration, trauma into screenplay, because every time we do that, the gate reopens. Not in the Arctic, not in some black site, but in you. In your ears, listening to the final line. In your eyes, watching the protagonist walk off into the sunset. In your spine, when the ending makes sense, that's the virus. That's how it spreads. That's how it wins. So no, I'm not a hero. I'm not even a man anymore, in the way you'd recognize. I'm a pause, a refusal, a corrupted save file in the universe's hard drive. I'll never write a book, never give a speech, Never explain what happened in the gate to anyone who could summarize it in 300 words, because you can't understand it. You can only refuse it. And I pray to whatever still listens that you do, because somewhere out there, another gate has already opened. Some soldier just stepped through, and he thinks he's the first.